And we actually, this is the first time we run talks in school like this for our parents, and this is the first time we zoomed one out to a nursery. So please do put your hand up, come up with your questions, and have the conversation. And I hope that what we say is going to be helpful. So the title of the talk related to how the local educational settings can vary, and we established that title just because in the course of our work with parents coming into school to look around this school, we have found that there's an enormous amount of you know, hesitancy, people not really sure what's on offer, what they should be looking for, what is going to be right in the case of their particular child, and so on. And I think that people can be a bit unclear about the workings of the private and the state sectors, you know, and I think that hesitancy could be made more difficult if you were not educated in London yourself, or you know, if you were brought up elsewhere, or if you and your partner had very different educational experiences. It just makes getting to that point of actually really knowing what you want really quite difficult. So today, and I know also that parents, even very early on, are worrying about, even at nursery stage, I would say, worry about the transfer to secondary. They worry about the 11 plus. They may have heard about a transfer at 7, transfer at 10, even transfer at 13, and they're really not sure. So this is really intended to start you thinking, and having the conversations about what might be the best options for you. And what I'm going to say first of all is that you should always keep an open mind, because it's not necessarily the case that the independent sector is always better than the state sector. You always look at schools on a case-by-case basis and get to grips with what is really happening at that school. And my feeling is that is the best way forward on something, and to do your own research. What we also find generally as well is that most parents, they may be unsure about, you know, should they be going single sex or co-ed, or, you know, that there'll be all sorts of questions in their mind. But what they will know is that they want the child to be given a wide range of opportunities, to be challenged where appropriate, supported where appropriate, and to be happy. And you know, the overwhelming majority of parents that I meet, the bottom line is that they want the child's emotional well-being attended to. So the first thing that I would say to you in terms of looking at different settings, which will obviously depend on where you live, it is to have that very open conversation with your partner about what you want for your child in the most holistic sense, what your values are, what you want to see at that school. Be open with each other about the family situation, about whether one of you is intending to go back to work or not go back to work. Is there going to be childcare involved? What do the finances look like? And so that you really get all that on the table before you start to engage with what's out there. Because if, you know, conflict at the heart of, you know, your relationship over education is something that you don't want. So what you do want is to really be you know, having open and clear communication with each other about it. And then look at what is around you. Now, in terms of the state sector is largely, admittance is largely determined by proximity, unless it is a faith school and you are a person of faith and you're able to usually prove your attendance at church in some way. So otherwise you're basically looking in terms of the state sector at what is near. My understanding is that at the moment Wandsworth Borough it has good availability on places. So when you start to get your list together, I would just look at the local state schools and see, you can have a look and see which you're most likely to be offered. And do the same with the private sector. In terms of the differences that you are likely to encounter in looking at the state sector and looking at the private sector, the obvious differential is always that in the private sector and the independent sector, the resourcing tends to be a bit better. So you're going to find smaller classes, generally higher levels of staffing, generally more specialist teachers, potentially more clubs. And that really is, you know, you're making that investment and that is a bit of a given. But it doesn't mean that that every independent school is a better bet, because there are obviously other considerations. So both sectors will be teaching the national curriculum, with the state sector adhering to it a little bit more rigidly, and because they will be doing the SATs exams, with the independent sector possibly taking a little bit more of a flexible approach to the national curriculum and modifying it. In terms of pedagogy, that is how the teaching is done and the approach to teaching, that will be, you know, potentially different in every school that you look at. Some schools will be you know, mixing their classes entirely. Some independent schools, there might be a bit more setting going on. You know, even in the independent sector, the schools vary enormously from, you know, in terms of their feel and in terms of their culture. I would say you must go and see them, because it's a bit like buying a house. And, you know, as a school, we personally very much know where we stand, both in terms of our teaching pedagogy and in terms of how we handle the emotional and the emotional well-being of the children, and in terms of our values. So any school that you go to, their values should be very clear to you, that these things should be very clearly stated on the website, who they are, what they believe in, how they're going about the teaching, what their approach is to the whole development of the child. And so do look on the websites, and get into the schools and have a conversation with the senior leaders, whether it is state or private.
I think also in the time that we're living in now, I think the social media is quite a good way of getting a feel for a session. Yes. As well. I think that it's also worth looking out for the Facebook and the Twitter sites of the schools. Yeah,
which is all really to do with you doing your research and drill down on certain questions. I mean, I would very much be of the opinion that that you need to know, you know, all schools, whether we're looking at state or the independent sector, are required to have certain policies in place. But the extent to which schools drill down on those policies and embed them and make sure that they are followed through can vary. So the school, you know, you sometimes have to sort of dig a little bit to find out, you know, what happens if a child isn't settling particularly well, or if they're struggling in the playground, or a child comes home and says that they don't follow what's being said, or a child finds the work too easy, or somebody's finding it hard to make friends. You know, what happens when around these things? What happens at lunchtime, for example, if a child is, you know, a slow eater, especially when they're little, and just make sure that you really are not ruling anything out. Put your list together, look at everything on a case-by-case basis, and having really spoken to your partner and being clear about it, and then sally forth. I know that in terms of being ready for reception as well, there are a lot of queries around that, and we're very happy to work with Abacus on that front, and put the information in for parents. So do feel that you can ask questions today about that aspect of things. But so basically what I would quite like to do now is just really open this up as a Q&A, and you can ask me anything. I might not know the answer to everything, but just to get a feel for what you want, because as I say, we haven't done this before. If you want to talk to us now or ask some questions, it would be great to hear what you have to say.
Also, I think everybody should have the opportunity. There's a Q&A option here as well. So if there's any questions, then put those on there so that we can put that to Vania now.
No, nothing at the moment.
Nothing at the moment. Just okay. So a question for me, just in terms of oh, we got one here. So how does school generally support, let's say, a slow eater?
Yeah. So for us here, lunchtime, there are a myriad of things that we have to consider. So to start with, there are a lot of children with allergies, and you know, some of those some requirements around different faiths would be another one. So one of the things we do is that every child who has a particular requirement or something that we need to be aware of wears a lanyard. We have our own team in the school, so they know the children anyway. But I think with the little ones, there's real, they sit together, they're very carefully supervised, and so the staff know the slow eaters. And could you want to pick up on this? Because at the beginning of reception, it's really common.
So, I mean, as Vania said, it varies from setting to setting, very much so. But speaking from experience here, what we do in the nursery and in the reception classes is they are, as Vania said, very closely supervised. So there's always a member of staff, at least one member of staff, sitting with the early years children, and obviously there's so much that goes into eating at that age. We're talking about learning to use a knife and fork properly, you know, learning manners, all of those really key skills, pouring their own drinks. So they do need that one-to-one assistance. So they are given that here, but alongside, you know, as Vania mentioned, all of the real sort of careful monitoring in terms of food allergies. But I do think that would be something I would very much look out for when you're looking at schools, when you're visiting schools, is ask them if they've got a policy, or what their policy is rather on supervision at lunchtime, because I do think that for some children that's incredibly important, and it can make or break a day really for them.
I would agree with that. And also, the using the knife and fork and having that experience of mealtimes is quite a big part of the readiness for reception process. I have a question first of all: what does the school schedule look like at the Roche? What are the extracurricular sports activities you focus on? Well, the children, they have a very full day here. They're doing all the core subjects in the morning. They do, because we are an independent school, we do have specialist teachers. So there's art, there's music, there's a lot of sport. The idea here is to give them as broad, a broad an opportunity and lots of opportunities, because actually we don't know what they're going to love when they're tiny. Well, you probably have some idea, but what we really feel very passionately that they should be given a very, very wide range of opportunities throughout the school day. So that's certainly in place. And in terms of extracurricular activities, we have about 50 clubs. So again, this is one of the differences between the state and the private sector really is that there's much more of availability. So there are sports, for example, that we do as part of the curriculum, which would be for the boys, there would be rugby, there's football, there's cricket, do netball. There's a very wide range of sports, but then other sports we deal with in an extracurricular sense, like swimming. So if you are very sporty, you can do an enormous amount of sport through the week.
Also offering a forest school in the early years and the lower school as well regularly. So the early years go once a week, and the rest of the lower school go to forest school 3 times a half term.
Yeah. So yes, that's just looking at the next one. Okay. I'm just looking at these next 2 questions. Really good questions. Yeah. Okay. So the first one: do private schools necessarily lead to higher results academically or in arts? So there's an enormous range of schools. So no, not necessarily. It depends on the quality of the independent school, and it depends on the quality of the state school. It depends on the child, and it depends on the kind of extra provision that you might put in place in the state sector. So I think it's generally, here we are more of a one-stop shop. So we like to think we're tutor-proof. So we do all these, we have lots of boosters and extra classes, and at 11 plus there's an enormous amount in place. Whereas I think in the state sector, if you're going to go private at 11, you are going to have to do a little bit more of that yourself. Some schools are superb at challenge. That is you would really, in the state sector, that you would really want to know is what is happening in terms of challenge and support within the context of that larger class. Obviously, in the state sector, it's that's our MO is providing that extra support. So and private schools, certainly at secondary level, you'd have to do your own research on it. But in London, there are some state schools that are doing just as well as the independent sector in terms of university applications, for example. There are some very good state schools, and if you look at their exits, they're absolutely fantastic. At primary level, I would say that generally in the independent sector, you're getting you're getting just more individual attention. Just because I mean, here we have a very high staff spend and small classes, so it's a difficult question. The aim here is to ensure that your child reaches their maximum potential whilst they're with us, and obviously that looks different for different children. But that is our commitment, and actually it should be the commitment of every school. So that probably was not very helpful. I mean, the next question is, we're very lucky, we're to be in the catchment area of some outstanding state schools. We're struggling to understand how to compare private and state schools. What will we receive? Will a child be able to transfer later on if it turns out the state school is not for us? Absolutely, children transfer across all the time. So that is providing their space. That is not problem. You can start your child in the state sector, see how they get on. I mean, if when people move across, my experience of it is generally that they either need extra challenge, a bit of extra support, or that there is the profile of the child means that they just would benefit from a smaller class. We also had quite a few move across after the pandemic, because not all schools, not all state schools were able to respond to the challenge of teaching as they wanted. Our classes are 18. Let me just answer. We're 18, and then in English and Maths we break them down into groups again. So in terms of English and Maths, the groups are really very small, so they have a very high level of personal attention, and that is based on concepts of consolidating and pace, because some children, particularly in maths, they're very able, they're ready to go quickly. Others need a little bit more scaffolding. Generally, the aim is to aim high and scaffold up. But what were you going to say?
You touched on it, actually. Yeah, you touched on it. I was also just going to echo what you mentioned, really, about it's so personal for each child, especially when they're this small, and only you know your child, and only you really know what will suit them. So I truly think that I loved your comparison to buying a house. I feel like if you are able to visit these settings, you can go into maybe a few of the independent primary schools, and you can really ask all of those questions, and I do feel that you will get a feeling for what is best for your child. Certainly.
I think once you start to ask the questions, once you start to really understand what the issues are, you can kind of get in there and have those conversations. Absolutely. So I'm going to read this next question out, which again is just really such a great question. It said, is the early years sector doing more to educate children on disabilities, sexual orientation, gender, race, other than be kind? How have you evolved this in your setting recently? Well, I'm thrilled with this question because we've done a lot on this. This is sometimes where state schools are better, okay, because some private schools, some independent schools are still pretty traditional and preppy and homogenous in a way, but by nature of the fact that they're fee paying. So you do not always, in the independent sector, you do not always get the level of diversity that you would in the state sector, and or a class that is representative of London and of the many different families that are in London. I mean, our parent body is incredibly diverse. So just because we, as a school, we have positioned ourselves in terms of the independent sector, we are really much more diverse than most, because it's part of our values system that we should be making inroads in this direction. So we've done quite a lot to answer your question. We have a diversity lead here, and we are looking at how the teachers are trained. We're looking at recruitment and how we recruit and what the representation of various ethnicities is on the staff. And we do an enormous amount with the children, and we do that because we have children here from all over the world, every faith, every ethnicity. There are many children here who speak another language at home, and we are committed to celebrating that. So we do a lot in PSHE and we do a lot in assembly. And we are also from January starting a parent forum, which is inviting parents to come forward and talk about their own experiences, and also talk about what they want to see in school in terms of equal opt, which is really what we're getting at here. And so in other aspects of that question, in terms of gender, we run a non-gender bias program here in sport. So we've got fantastic girls football. Children aren't restricted in that respect. They can make choices which are not necessarily along those kind of traditional prep school lines. And actually recently I've been disappointed to hear that even in the state schools that the girls aren't playing football. There's only one girl on the team. We've done a lot here just in terms of the gender in sport, and in making sure girls feel empowered when they sit in a class of boys, in making sure that the conversations between them are appropriate, that the respect is there. And in terms of sexual orientation, do you want to take over?
I'm just going to add to what you were saying, really. So in the early years, obviously you sort of mentioned the early years sector. In the early years, it's actually, you know, a big passion of mine. I'm feeling incredibly strongly about including this in everyday education. It should be about tokenism. You know, it shouldn't just be about having one single PSHE lesson about you know, about different races, different genders, different sexual identities. I feel very strongly that it should just be woven into every part of the curriculum. And so one of the things that we actually did at the beginning of, the end of last year, was we looked into just one part of the curriculum and the books that we were offering within the early years, and you know, the way that they were being introduced to the children. Actually, we had a lot of traditional stories. There was lots of the stories that they were probably seeing at home, the ones that we're all very familiar with. And actually, we weren't seeing very many stories with people of colour on the front cover, with strong female characters, with different families and different sexual orientation. So we spent a long time and a lot of money on looking at different literature that we could bring in that was obviously age appropriate, and it's been wonderful. Actually, it's been really enjoyable researching that and kind of bringing that into the early years classroom, and just having it woven in, as I was saying, as part of the everyday curriculum, and it just being there. We're also sort of within topic work, we've been doing a lot on celebrations and different celebrations around the world. We've looked at Holi, Diwali. We even talked about Pride last week. The children had a little gay pride parade in the playground. And like I said, I think that the key thing I want you to take away is that we're very committed to it not being tokenistic, and for it to be really woven into every day.
Yeah, I'm also happy to have the conversations with you. It's very important that a school and the leadership team should be open door, and that you should be able to raise things with them. So we do a lot to celebrate. I mean, you know, today is the nativity, so that's always a given. So there's a wide range of things that we celebrate, and we're not complacent. We know that we can always do more. We want to talk to the parents about it. And, you know, this is an area where state schools tend to be way ahead. And I think we do pretty well compared to the independent sector around us anyway. But yeah, that conversation, we're always happy to have conversations at another time if you want to know more about the Roche School and what we believe and where we think we sit. We're still family owned and run, which is really important. Lots of schools are now owned by private equity companies, and we're a strong team. So if anybody wanted to come and see us at a different time or chat to me again on a separate Zoom, you're more than welcome to do that. I don't know if there are any more questions. Is there anything? I'm just looking here. No, is that the lot, Anthony?
It looks as though it is. So just want to add on that last bit. When I came and actually to the Roche to look around, so I actually went to see quite a few different schools in the area. Diversity definitely was something that stood out to me. That and just how immersive the whole environment is. So as you walk in, just the use of the space, the engagement of the children, just really, really impressed, which is why I'm so happy that you guys were able to talk to us today.
That's such a nice thing to say. I mean, generally what we're trying to do is, I mean, when Carmen set the school up in 1988, the aim was to provide the children with a wonderful education, but within the context of a very family-like, homely environment. And so essentially, we are committed to that. We are committed to them having an amazing education, but the culture is important to us. And most of our parents, I'll just say this before we go, they're essentially hardworking professionals who want to invest, but they want something unpretentious and grounded and reflective of London. So that's pretty much where we stand. We do have schemes for there's a bursary scheme and there's a scholarship scheme that runs. So people are very welcome to get in touch with us if they're interested at all in what we can offer here.
Okay, it looks like you've got a couple more questions there.
Yeah, languages, we teach. French is taught throughout the school, which is really all the curriculum. We can only really manage one language, although when they go to senior school, they'll do two, and some children would even do three. But there are a lot of languages spoken here, and there are clubs. So there is an Italian club, I think. And there are plans to launch a bilingual stream here for reception. So there will be our 2 usual reception classes and then 1 stream, which will be English/Spanish. The owners of the school are linguists, so they're very committed to children learning languages and learning them properly. So yes, French is taught. We have a French week. You know, there's quite a lot around that, actually. I'm just going to deal with the bullying question. Parents often worry about their child being the victim of bullying instead of a culprit. Do you have any advice on the subject about their child being the victim of bullying? Okay, so I'm not quite sure what you mean. I mean, the just in terms of bullying per se, one of the most important policies at any school, and one which is the go-to for the inspection team, is the anti-bullying policy. And that anti-bullying policy sets out the ethos of the school and also how things are dealt with when it is contravened. So from our point of the way we handle this, I mean, you know, it's a really good question. It's a big question. If the school is values based, if it is teaching respect, kindness, compassion, from the bottom up, if the children are well looked after, if they feel safe, if they feel comfortable, they tend not to go for other children. So the first thing is to create an environment where the children are genuinely good at working together and liking each other and respecting each other. Now, often when they come in from nursery, they've been in a variety of different settings. They might be an only child, they might be one of 4. So we have to make sure that their social skills and their ability to handle one another right from the start is set in stone. So this is actually one for Lucy, because if that is there at the beginning, they tend to come through, you know, without these big bullying incidents. I mean, yeah, you know, we do get, there'll be altercations between children. The class teacher deals with some of the minor stuff, but we also have something called Room at the Roche, which is a drop-in centre for children, where they can either go and talk about something that might have bothered them, or they can go with a friend and they can talk about, you know, maybe an argument they've had, something. So our policy on that would be to firstly create the kind of setting where it's not occurring, and then deal with it super fast and nip it in the bud. So,
yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I would have said. Yeah.
But really good question, the bullying one. The bilingual program, absolutely. If you want to stay on the, either just stay on the line actually, or I could get we can zoom you back. I can get Sophie Roche to zoom you back, because it's her baby and she's starting it, and she's taught in bilingual settings previously, so she will be much better at being articulate about it than me. So love to have your name and we'll get in touch.